The problem with being ill is that there are so many other things that you would much rather be doing. Unfortunately, for one reason or another, you might not be able to do those things. Take me, for example. I was ill last week, which prevented me from recording the news. It also prevented me from catching up with several games that I have been intending to start, because it's difficult to concentrate when you're trying to cough up half a lung every 5 minutes. Be that as it may, I am on the road to recovery, and we're back with the news. But there's a lot to catch up with, because there's a lot that changed, so we're going to just dive straight in. Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Gossy News, your regular selection of choice cuts and hot takes from the world of video game news. As I said earlier, I was ill last week, which prevented me recording, and a lot of things did happen. Chief among them, the announcement from Google that they were shutting down Stadia in January of 2023. According to Phil Harrison, the VP and General Manager of Stadia, while Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technology foundation, it hasn't gained the traction with users that we expected, so we've made the difficult decision to begin winding down our Stadia streaming service. He goes on to say that the underlying technology platform that powers Stadia has been proven at scale and transcends gaming. We see clear opportunities to apply this technology across other parts of Google like YouTube, Google Play and our augmented reality efforts, as well as make it available to our industry partners, which aligns with where we see the future of gaming headed. We remain deeply committed to gaming, and we will continue to invest in new tools, technologies and platforms that power the success of developers, industry partners, cloud customers and creators. Which is all nicey, but here's the problem. Google didn't actually tell anyone that they were going to be doing this, not the customers themselves, nor the developers who were still making games. Now, if you think about games development, and you think how long it actually takes to make a game, some of these developers have actually been working on games exclusively for Google Stadia for at least a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. As for the consumers, the players, they're at a bit of a loss. Google have said that they're going to refund all purchases made through their stores, and they're also going to allow players to access their library into early 2023, which is great. The problem is, that also is a little bit of a sop, because a lot of these developers don't have the systems in place to move information from Google Stadia to another system. And the main reason for that is because some of the games that are on Google Stadia are exclusive to Google Stadia, and they don't have another version in another format on another system, or they're a game without crossplay. So you would have to reinstall the game and start again on a new system if you want to play it on a new system. That doesn't make you say that developers are ignoring the situation though. Ubisoft, Bungie, IO Interactive, Tequila Works, and various others have started mobilizing in order to recover people's data. They're working with Google to basically create some kind of pathway to allow people to move their data from one platform to another. But they have limited time to work with, and they are working as hard as they can, so we will watch this space. Now, a lot of people have been asking what caused the death of Stadia. How did it happen? I will be doing an episode of The Big Slice to look into that, but also to look into the future of cloud gaming, because I do think it still has a future. But anyway, one of the things that could have been a contributing factor was Google's attitude towards single-player games. See, Stadia was set up to be this kind of all bells and whistles, all guns blazing multiplayer console experience. And yet, when you think about it, people who play MMOs and multiplayer games are actually the minority of gamers. And I know that might seem like an oxymoron, but think about it in real terms. A lot of the press that you see, a lot of the coverage that you see on YouTube and streaming sites, they are not reflective of the majority of people who play video games. It's one of the reasons why I dislike the term gamers, because you don't call somebody who watches films a filmer or a movier. You don't call someone who reads a book a booker or anything like that. You can say they read books. We don't call them a reader. You don't wander around saying you're a reader, are you? So why are gamers deserving of an identity moniker that no other medium applies to their fans? Gaming is no more special than any other entertainment media. But because of the moniker of gamer, you create this illusion that the people who play games and are prominent within the community are representative of the community. which they are not. So all those streamers who play all those games, they are not representative of the majority of people who play video games who simply want to be entertained. They don't really want to play with people they don't know. They have a core group of friends, maybe they're working, have kids. They don't have the time to sink into things like MMOs or Destiny 2 or anything like that. They just want a game that's quick, easy to pick up, and nobody bothers them. And I feel that's the key thing there. Nobody bothers them. So come January, we'll be saying goodbye to Google Stadia, but in an ironic twist that a lot of people aren't aware of, Google are actually in talks with Tottenham Hotspur, the football club in London, about the name of the Spurs Stadium, which they want to call the Google Stadium, and that may actually come to fruition in early next year. So we could be saying goodbye to Stadia and hello to Stadium. Isn't that ironic? Anyway, let's move on to Disco Elysium. There's a whole shit show going on over there with the ZAUM Cultural Association. Founding members of Disco Elysium involuntarily left the company, according to some of the core developers, and the fallout from that has been ongoing. There have been more and more revelations from people who were actually working as part of the ZAUM Cultural Association, and what they've been saying is a story of business suits coming in, taking over the running of the company. They feel that because they're businessmen, they know how everything should be run, they have all the experience, nobody else knows better than them, and they will start running things into the ground because, well, among the suits and the executives, there is a firm belief that you can make video games by committee, and that all you need is a checklist of things that, if you include them in the game, will make the game a success. I've literally just made that up, but tell me if you don't think there is some truth in what I've just said. Because I can easily imagine somebody from the board of directors or some senior level like that going down to QA or a low-level developer or programmer and saying, so what is it that we need to add into this to make the game successful? And having them just list down a bunch of stuff that they add onto a checklist. We need this, we need this, we need this. If it's got all these, it's a success. It's $1 million idea. Tell me you can't imagine that. Because I can all too easily. Anyway, Bellula actually has done a piece on this. I will link it below because it is really interesting and he does gather a lot of information from various sources. There is also a really interesting interview that's been done on Game Pressure by Carol Lasker with one of the co-creators of the ZAUM Cultural Association about the whole situation. I will link that as well because that is really interesting to read as well. Anyway, moving on to, well, the shrinkage of the video games industry by the acquisition, let's say, of various developers and publishers by bigger companies, like Microsoft and Activision Blizzard, for example. Now, as people are already aware, that is being scrutinized by various regulatory bodies in various parts of the world to find out if the deal is going to hinder competition, help to promote it, or maintain the status quo. That's really all they're interested in. Promoting competition or maintaining the status quo. Anything other than that will be a failure for Microsoft. The Brazilian government have already agreed unconditionally, much to the chagrin, I imagine, of a certain Jim Ryan, who only a month ago went to the European Union and their regulatory body to complain effectively about the fact that Microsoft were trying to buy Activision, spitting out his dummies, saying things like, if Call of Duty becomes exclusive, then that's going to hurt our profit margin, blah, 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 blah. Which, and I've been saying this for ages, is bullshit, because number one, PlayStation's business model has been based on exclusivity for years, and number two, Call of Duty is no longer the console seller it used to be. There is actually a third addition to that. The Brazilian regulator, who approved the deal unconditionally, has said that Sony could compete without Call of Duty because Nintendo already does compete without Call of Duty. Nintendo doesn't have that many Activision Blizzard games on the Switch, but it's still kicking everyone's ass. So Sony, being a bigger company than Nintendo, has no right to complain and no leg to stand on. The European regulators have sent out questionnaires to other developers and publishers to find out what they think about the Activision deal. I do hope that the European regulators also look at Brazil's decision and their reasoning for it, because it might help inform their decision. Anyway, moving on to PlayStation themselves, and they've done something a little bit weird. See, they've introduced this new PlayStation Stars loyalty program where if you buy a certain number of full-price games, or get a certain number of trophies, or both, then you go up to the next tier of this loyalty program. Now, here's where the problem is. It's the ultimate final mega reward from PlayStation Stars for full-price games, and 128 rare trophies will give you improved customer service. Now, I'm just going to let that sink in for a second there. That's better customer service at the cost of 4 full-price games and 128 rare trophies, which might take you hundreds of hours to get. So there's a financial paywall and a time-based paywall to getting better customer service, which you as the customer might rightly expect from the very beginning. So this whole PlayStation Stars thing with the improved customer service is just putting quality customer service behind a paywall. That suggests to me several things. Either Jim Ryan and the rest of the executives at Sony think consumers are a bunch of idiots who'll basically swallow anything, or that Jim Ryan and the rest of the executives know that Sony, especially PlayStation, have really, really shit customer services and want to try and make money off improving the customer services by getting maybe some competent people to man their phones. Sticking with the contraction of the video games industry, it's not just developers and publishers that are actually being bought up. See, Fandom, which is a wiki hosting service and fan platform that provides 40 million plus pages of content and over 250,000 wiki communities to inform and entertain fans about their favourite video games, movies and TV shows, they have bought Comic Vine, Cord Cutters News, Game FAQs, Gamespot, Giant Bomb, Metacritic and TV Guide from Red Ventures in a deal that's costing around $55 million. Fandom is actually been set up in 2004 by Jimmy Wales, who is the co-founder of Wikipedia, and by entrepreneur Angela Beasley. According to the CEO of Fandom, Perkins Miller, we're thrilled to add these powerful, authoritative brands into the Fandom platform, which will expand our business capabilities and provide immersive content for our partners, advertisers, and fans. The trusted insights, ratings, and content they provide will make us a one-stop shop for fans across their entertainment and gaming journey. Now, I can understand the desire to consolidate review scores of various types and all sorts of other aspects of games development, games production, movie production, TV show production, all of those things, anime, manga, whatever, consolidate them all into one platform so that a simple search will bring up all sorts of information. My concern about this, companies like Fandom and ReadPop, who own sites like GamesIndustry.biz, Video Games Chronicle, Eurogamer, things like that, all of these journalistic sites are no longer independent. They are part of a group, a chain, and when you get that, you get bias. It is unconscious in some cases, but for the most part, you will have a board of directors or some executives who have an angle that they want to achieve, and they will try and drive the narrative through the news media. More stories of the contraction of the video games industry come in the form of Tencent, who have shifted their focus when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. They are no longer pursuing a policy where they will be buying out whichever company that they have their eye on. Instead, what they're looking at doing is buying majority stakes in mainly overseas gaming companies. Why are they doing that? Well, without getting into the politics and everything else, there are various situations that have slowed the growth of video games in China, and they've been going on for at least a couple of years now. One of those things is the Chinese crackdown on gaming itself. Now, in order to offset their slow growth locally, Tencent are eyeing global expansion because, from their perspective, and their thoughts are actually in line with how I would think of this, it's better for them to expand and buy a small piece of multiple businesses, because those businesses will continuously be making stuff. They don't need to own them outright. They just need to get a little bit of their profits coming in. And those profits will be trickles that become streams that become rivers. Now, if you contrast that with having a small number of companies that you own outright, those companies can only produce a certain number of things year in, year out. And while the profits might 100% be yours, that money might be nowhere near the amount that you would have received if you'd basically spread yourself more evenly over a wider area. So, for our final story about the contraction of the video games industry, we have to go to Saudi Arabia, and this one might be a little bit contentious and I might get a little bit angry. Saudi Arabia have set aside $13 billion to acquire a major publisher. This is part of a plan to make Saudi Arabia the ultimate global hub for the games and esports sector by 2030, but that's not the whole story. That $13 billion is just to buy a company. It's not to set up the whole thing. That falls to Saudi Arabia's Savvy Games Group, who outlined an investment plan that will see it commit $37.8 billion to build the country's presence in the global games industry, including $13.3 billion, which has been earmarked for the acquisition and development of a leading game publisher to become a strategic development partner. The Savvy Games Group is actually 100% owned by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which has Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman serving as the chairman of its board of directors. According to the Crown Prince, we are harnessing the untapped potential across the esports and games sector to diversify our economy, drive innovation in the sector, and further scale the entertainment and esports competition offerings across the kingdom. Now, all of that seems fairly reasonable, but given how the video games community likes to champion various causes, I want to know how many people would buy games that were made in Saudi Arabia, or games from companies that are owned by the Saudi royal family, because Saudi Arabia has one of the worst human rights records on the planet. Look it up. Not only that, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is still considered by many people to be the man who ordered the assassination and dismemberment of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Obviously, for various reasons, I do have to say that there is no direct proof that he was the person who gave the order, but when your bodyguards and your guards and various other people who are surrounding you are the ones who are committing the crimes, and you're the person in charge, it's easy to go from A to B, is all I'm saying. Which leaves the question, will the video games community buy video games from somebody who is considered to be guilty of that, or from a country with a human rights record as bad as that? And the hopeful among you might say, we would never do that, but I have to say, sorry, I'm going to ruin your nice little dream that you have about the video games industry, because the majority of people will, because they won't care. After all, you still buy Chinese games, don't you? And they have a god-awful human rights record. Now, knowing my luck, someone's going to come along and say to me, keep politics out of video games, or something stupid like that. So before they actually have a chance to do that, I'm going to motor on quickly to Nintendo, who have the most amazing story. According to a developer called Gamazumi, Nintendo no longer allows games to show uncensored breasts. The family-friendly Nintendo. Because apparently, on the eShop, there have been various, erotic, pornographic, hentai games available, and they've been selling. Now, the Switch is 5 years old, and some of these games have been on there for years, and now Nintendo is changing its policy. Sony changed their policy already. Microsoft, I don't think, have a policy on it, but I don't think you can sell these games on Game Pass or in the Microsoft Store, but they are available on Steam. I have a few questions about this entire situation. Number one would be, how did the wholesomely cute, family-friendly, child-friendly Nintendo that doesn't remake the same game over and over again and is so wholesomely cute that they're not really evil deep down inside and don't force their developers to crunch at all and will force you to buy the same game over and over again, and people will do it because, hey, you've been brainwashed to be part of the Nintendo cult. I want to know how a company with that much control over what it offers and what it sells, and so much control over how it promotes itself, to the point where it will take down all sorts of videos on YouTube, it will copyright strike entire YouTube channels to protect its own intellectual property, how a company like that is so tightly and strictly controlled, didn't know that uncensored boobs were being sold on their eShop. because it would be impossible for them not to know, which means they did know and they allowed it. So maybe Nintendo isn't as family friendly as everyone thinks. Anyway, moving on to Cyberpunk 2077, which crossed the 20 million milestone in terms of sales, and that followed the recent resurgence thanks to the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime. Loads of people have been flocking to CD Projekt Red's game after watching the anime series, which I've got to admit had everything I wanted for a Cyberpunk story. Cyberpunk is the one genre where you can basically fit any type of story, whether it's horror, love, romance, adventure. You can even have fantasy in Cyberpunk. I'll let you think about how you'd manage that, but it is possible. Anyway, regardless of how it's happened, this puts CD Projekt Red in that rare category of developers who released a game that, through misrepresentation, outright lies, or just plain hubris, failed to meet the customer's approval and were universally panned by critics. Hello Games did it with No Man's Sky, Square Enix did it with Final Fantasy XIV version 1.0, CD Projekt Red did it with Cyberpunk. All three of those companies made promises, stuck to their guns, communicated with the audience, got feedback, built on that feedback, and made the game better. And now CD Projekt Red are being rewarded for their diligence in making the game better, with increased numbers of players, increased sales, everything like that. It's the same thing that we've seen with No Man's Sky. It's become an amazing game. I challenge anyone to say No Man's Sky is a shit game, because it's not. Same with Final Fantasy XIV. Anyone who says it's a shit game, seriously, pull your head out your ass. Any game that has tens of millions of people who play the game day in, day out, and consider the game to be enjoyable at the very least for them to play it daily, it can't be shit just because you say it's shit. But then again, some people are arrogant enough to believe that their opinion is the only one that matters. Moving on to some news about adaptations of video games, and the first one is a little thing. Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal, who are the stars of the new HBO TV show The Last of Us, which is an adaptation of the game, they were actually encouraged not to play the game. And I kind of understand it when you look at it from the acting perspective, because the director obviously doesn't want them to be influenced by the voice acting in the game or by the actual expressions or movements of the characters in the game. He wants it to be a vision that he is putting forward and wants to rely on the actor's skills to portray the emotion, which I get, totally get, and I actually do agree with the decision. A lot of people might be confused by that, but it has to do with interpretation. If you look at something like Shakespeare, for example, different actors will interpret different roles in Shakespeare in different ways. That's why different directors can do the same film, but it'll come out with sometimes very different end results. One thing that we might see that in is the Silent Hill games. According to the director of the new Silent Hill movie, there are multiple games that are in the works. Several games, in fact, are in development as we speak, and there are several teams on it. This is according to director Christophe Gans, who made the comments during an interview in France that was translated by Resetera. According to Gans, I'm working with the Silent Hill team, the original creators at Konami. There are several games in development as we speak. There are several teams on it. With a big line of games, they will revive the franchise. I think they were really impressed with the success of the remakes of Resident Evil that are evidently exceptional games. Moving on to Nintendo, we're back with them, and they have officially launched a new animation studio called Nintendo Pictures, but sadly they weren't the ones who animated the new Mario movie. That was Illumination. You know, the ones who do Despicable Me and stuff like that. This is actually the end result of a process that's been going on since July, because Nintendo actually went to acquire a Japanese CG company called Dynamo Pictures back in July. Now that the deal is done, Dynamo Pictures can change their name to Nintendo Pictures, and their focus now is going to be on the development of visual content utilizing Nintendo IP. According to a company message on the Nintendo and Dynamo Pictures website, through our videos, we aim to make Nintendo characters known to customers around the world and create one-of-a-kind videos that will remain in their memories forever. To this end, each and every one of our employees will work hard to create an organization that can continue to grow by always considering what could be interesting to customers around the world and engaging in production work that they enjoy themselves. We will continue to take on the challenge of providing unique and surprising images to customers around the world, transcending generations and eras. Which is a noble sentiment, Nintendo, but you also did just declare that you would be forcing animators to work long hours and effectively do the animation version of crunch. And if that's the case, it'll be interesting to see how Nintendo face up to that. Anyway, our penultimate story, Bandai Namco are following in the footsteps of French company Microids by setting up their own music label. They've released 2 albums so far, music from Elden Ring and music from Tales of Arise. In a statement, Bandai called music a core component of the gaming experience and said that it aims to bring video game music to as many people as possible. In which case, why not put it on your YouTube channel? Or why not hire a bunch of musicians to create custom music that you would then offer for free to creators to use, so you would get continuous credit from that. That's what Riot Games did with Sessions, and Square Enix have a channel dedicated to music from Final Fantasy games, amongst others. So it can be done. Anyway, our final story is a bit of a fun one. The Street Fighter VI beta came out, and it featured a slightly odd character creator, which resulted in the players having fun with the bizarre creations that they could come up with. For example, a character with skinny legs, huge belly and chest, huge gorilla arms, massive head, really looks out of proportion with the rest of the body. A guy who is more arms than legs and more belly button than anything else. And a guy who's basically just a walking penis. Seriously, when you see the pictures on Twitter, you'll understand. If you want to see those pictures and more bizarre creations from Street Fighter 6, then use the hashtag Street Fighter 6 on Twitter and you'll probably find a whole bunch of them. With that, we are at the end of the episode, and it's been a slightly extended one, as I said, mainly because I was ill last week and there was more to catch up with. Let me know what you thought about all of the topics covered in this episode in the comments below. I will be back on the next episode of Gossip News or on an episode of The Big Slice, whichever one comes first. Until then, take care of yourselves and thanks for watching.